Hello and welcome to Cinema to the Letter. This episode is that indie, known as Brigsby Bear. On Cinema to the Letter, we break down the very nature of cinema, letter by letter. For each episode of a season topic, we cover 6 films that fit a C for classic, I for indie, N for new, E for egregious, M for masterpiece, and A for atypical. Because doesn't love an acronym, am I right? I am Thomas, and hold on, I gotta search something on my computer. How to learn things from my new computer. There, okay. I just need to do some research. You'll be good. You'll be fine.
Hello, I am Brian, and this is dope as shit.
Hell yeah, it is. So dope.
What?
Yes. Well, welcome everybody to the second episode of our SNL Vehicle season, where we're doing our Eye for Indie. And I'm gonna say here, Brian, in prepping for this particular season, I had the most difficulty with like the Eye for Indie in terms of what to pick. It's a bit more of like a limited crop, especially when you consider like usually movies that are classified as indies that star people who were on SNL tend to be the kind of indies where it's like, is this really an indie if it stars like somebody who was on like one of the bigger shows out there, unless it was like someone extremely obscure who had like a very limited run on SNL. It's kind of hard to parse that out.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of these like quote unquote smaller movies that these SNL people do don't fit into indie just because they're like $20 million ish, maybe a little bit more, 20 to 30 million. But there are options, there are like situations where, you know, someone like Adam Sandler, for instance, will just choose to do a much smaller movie or something like that. And so it happens, but yeah, it is kind of this kind of weird zone that we find ourselves in here, I think, for these SNL vehicles.
Plus, there's the frustrating kind of indies where it's like an indie dramedy that like you can tell what it's going for. Like the textbook one for me is that has the SNL connection is something like Skeleton Twins
Yes,
with
right.
Bill Hader and Kristen Wiig is 100% that kind of movie that like will play at a Sundance and will receive some kind of acclaim there, and then it finally reaches other people and it's like, oh, this is what it is, and it's like, is it a drama? Is it a comedy? Is it a really good mix of either? And usually the answer is yes, and it just doesn't really end up like working nearly as well as you would hope it would, especially with the people involved.
Yeah. You can also, I think, have the situation where one of these people from SNL does something smaller like this, and Sundance is a great call, right? Like, I often think of these movies as being very Sundance, uh, both they premiere there, but also just the sensibilities and the tone that they often have. Um, but you can also kind of have a situation where people are drawn more to a movie when it is like an SNL member, and it draws more eyes to something like that. But yeah, still kind of a weird category, and I think especially because like there's SNL people who have been in indie movies, but like Wes has worked with quite a few SNL members, correct? Is that
Well, I mean, Bill Murray's the obvious
Bill
one.
Murray is the obvious one,
Yeah,
right?
right,
Like
right.
he does like the Wes Anderson movies, but he's part of like the larger like ensemble of the Wes Anderson like troupe. So yeah, a little weird, I guess, sometimes.
Yeah, but I think we went with a very curious choice, which we should just at least talk about before we get into the movie itself, a bit about the star and co-writer Kyle Mooney, who is the most recent of the sort of SNL cast members we've had here. He had a tenure from about 2013 to 2022. And mainly, I wasn't watching as regularly around like Kyle Mooney's major tenure. This is kind of where I started falling off of SNL, and I wasn't as like huge on watching it consistently. But at the same time, Kyle Mooney always stood out to me whenever I watched SNL sketches because he was always like a consummate kind of player, like the perfect guy you want for an SNL repertory cast, where he didn't like have too many super recurring characters that would kind of like take up space and would kind of just be like the constant thing. Just always reliable for any sketch, no matter how big or small his part. But at the same time, when he did lead a sketch, it would kind of stand out and be interesting. I know we have we mentioned this previously, the YouTube playlist. I don't know if you watched any of those for the Mooney element of it or not.
I watched a couple of them after watching this movie, and yeah, like I mentioned this already. I probably will keep mentioning it just for context, but like I am not a big SNL viewer. I have checked in for an episode or two usually if I like the musical guest. But watching some of these like clips of Mooney specifically, like he does kind of stand out as one of the better cast members of this kind of tenure for SNL because I mean a lot of things, but I think he just has this kind of like very fresh kind of like energy. I think that is like you feel it with a few of the other members, obviously like Beck Bennett, which he does some sketches with, but there's just something about the like him in particular and the way that he does this and the way that he like obviously like he has now directed a movie and he brings a lot of the very like kid who grew up in the 90s kind of energy to a lot of like his sketches and a lot of like the this movie in particular, of course. But yeah, I think he is like for modern SNL, which is often very like derided and is not thought of in a very in a good light. I think he is kind of a highlight on this show. I would say like him or like obviously Kenan Thompson,
who has been and will eternally be the longest tenured SNL cast member now.
Yeah, which is crazy.
He started in 2003 and he's been going ever since.
It's crazy. Great for him.
Yeah.
Or someone like, or like what is Cecily Strong. I really like her from like the sketches I've seen from her. He is one of the kind of highlights of this modern SNL era though. And I don't know. I guess had he been in other movies up until this point? I'm not really sure entirely, but
I don't know, because I think he really just kind of came out of nowhere with like SNL, because he had been on like a sketch team that involved Beck Bennett, who you mentioned earlier, also appears in this movie. We'll get into this later, but this movie is like the most SNL cast members stacked of like, or just SNL people in general, regardless, like cast members, writers, directors, even are involved in this one. But I think it would have to be like the SNL stuff. I think particularly one of the clips I had there, I don't know if you watched this one, but the Del Taco commercial sketch with Adam Driver.
Oh, I didn't get to that one, but okay,
oh my God. That one's amazing. And it's like it all centers mainly around like they're trying to shoot a Del Taco commercial, and Kyle Mooney is the actor, and you have Beck Bennett as like the director trying to like lead him to something, and Adam Driver's the weird fucking like representative from the Del Taco Corporation who just is like very frankly scolding this guy while Beck Bennett's trying to be like the director, like, no, look, hey, can you just do another take? You're not quite doing it. And Adam Driver just comes out like, what? He's full of crap. He's not doing it right at all. You gotta do something better than this kid. And they just keep repeating the phrase, hey man, I'm out of cash, which is his line in the commercial. And just each of them keep going like, no, you gotta do it like this. Hey man, I'm out of cash. And then Adam Driver does it. And it's one of those things where like they keep repeating the line over and over again. That could often be annoying to me, especially in a sketch comedy context. But Mooney, Bennett, and Adam Driver just know how to like differentiate it perfectly with each time they utter it to make it so fucking funny. And yeah, I think that's the thing, is that Mooney is such a like consummate, reliable player. You can tell that he comes from more of like the sketch comedy background of like, hey, you know what, I'm gonna like do the best possible like thing I can for whatever role I'm in, as opposed to like, around the same time you have someone like Kate McKinnon, who I think is very talented and very funny, but at the same time kind of got trapped in that recurring SNL, kind of like the star of SNL at a certain point. And they shoved her into every single sketch. And I just think like that energy can get a bit tiring when you make her sort of like, oh, she's in every single sketch doing like the biggest part, as opposed to Mooney just being like incredibly reliable, incredibly chill. What were the other ones that you watched then?
I definitely watched the brothers one where him and Beck Bennett are brothers and Liev Schreiber is there, and that's just like very funny. Liev Schreiber just hilarious.
The hosing them down and
the
shit like that.
The hosing is just so funny. And Mooney, like, again, like Beck Bennett's very good, but Mooney in that one is really kind of like is kind of killing it, especially when he's being hosed down. Just his reaction is so funny. And then I watched the fight one, which I think is what I think of Kyle Mooney as that kind of energy and like that kind of like it's kind of shot like a 90s like he's got like the new metal over it, which is just really fucking funny to me.
I like the fact that with Mooney, he also like he has that kind of like nostalgic kind of element to him, but he doesn't feel like he's like nostalgic in like the annoying way of like, oh, I just like really like these things from my past and I don't have anything interesting to say about them kind of deal. Like you can tell that even with like Y2K, which has a bit of that kind of like, hey, remember this bit from like from 1999 and all other stuff. There still is like a lot more attempts, at least, at like kind of warping that into like a fun kind of like horror comedy angle with that particular movie.
When I watched the fight, that sketch, like it feels like a lot of what he is trying to do with Y2K and sort of like both lovingly trying to like call back to like 90s era like music and references and stuff like that with like again just the way that sketch plays out, and there's just like fucking random like bro like new metal playing over it is just like so funny, and is like again like he weaves that really well into like Y2K, which is like a pretty fun movie, and I think shows like he definitely has a kind of like aesthetic, I guess, that he's trying to really go for with that kind of like 90s inspired kind of thing. And we obviously see it in this movie, but I think like yeah, he does it in a way that is somehow not nearly as annoying as it should be, which is very commendable, I think, because we've seen how that can go like very bad in some cases. But yeah,
which is also very key to like this movie that we're talking about today, with kind of like the nostalgic angle, but also even like the awkward acting I think is incredible from him and stuff, like the fight you mentioned, but also even there's another bit that was on there where it's him on Weekend Update trying to ask Colin Jost and Michael Shea about like, hey, you having an Oscar party this weekend? You want to what's happening? When's that happening? What's going on? And it's like there's an awkwardness, but it doesn't feel kind of like, I usually personally have an incredible like secondhand embarrassment with like cringe comedy.
Yes.
Like it's a major reason why like a lot of people love rewatching The Office. Just like I can't fucking go back to that. It's too like awkward for me to fucking sit in that again. I watched that shit when it was like on the air the first time, and I was like enjoying it but cringing through it the whole time. I can't imagine rewatching that shit. Just the one thing, the secondhand embarrassment just hurts too much. And I think he knows how to cushion that with just making his characters incredibly like funny on like a pure like silly level, so that like that secondhand embarrassment doesn't like completely overcrowd it, which I think is very key for, once again, this particular movie.
As we will get into, I realized while watching this movie, because I had heard about Brigsby Bear when it came out, and there were people being like, hey, this is a really good like indie comedy, like, hey, watch it at some point, and I never got around to it. But watching it, I realized I didn't know what the movie was about.
Yeah.
And I think it is walking on a tightrope for a lot of it, and it's balancing a lot of different kind of sensibilities and tones. And again, with that secondhand embarrassment thing, I think we'll get into it a little bit, but like I was so fearful that so much of this movie would just be me like cringing or just like upset, at just what decisions the movie made, and it is surprisingly not that. And I think he balances that kind of the different tones in a pretty like good way, I think, for what this movie is and what it's about actually, which is very interesting, I think.
Yeah, so why don't we go ahead and jump into it? Let's jump into Brigsby Bear.
Oh, come on, Brigsby, let me in. My laser cannon.
You did it, Brigsby!
Remember, just rapidly decaying organic material.
Goodbye!
There's something I need to tell you.
Everything's very big. It's really very big.
The reason you're here, the reason I'm here, is all just to help you.
Everyone says they're trying to help me, but nobody can find me the new episode of Brigsby.
There wasn't a new episode this week. This is about moving on with the rest of your life.
Try to imagine a hero. Just be normal, alright?
Hi, I'm James. I really like your clothes.
He's not on the bad side. He's on the good side.
Yes!
So Brigsby Bear came out July 28th, 2017, though it did have its premiere at Sundance, speaking of Sundance earlier, in January of that year. Written by Kyle Mooney and Kevin Costello, but we should mention the director is David McCary, who actually got his start directing some segment stuff on SNL. I included this a bit late in the YouTube playlist, which I'll probably link in the show notes for this whole season, honestly. But he did some really good kind of insert stuff for that, and also has directed a couple of things. Like I just watched the special that Julio Torres did about my favorite shapes, which is an incredibly weird, interesting version of a stand-up special that has like his kind of touches. But with SNL, he directed two very notable ones to me, which was one that's called Wells for Sensitive Boys.
Oh my god.
Have you seen that one?
I watched this one because it was very short. So funny. And
written by Julio Torres, which you can tell, right? Based on...
It makes a lot of sense, especially watching Problemista, which rules, by the way. Emma Stone is in the sketch and has the funniest line delivery to her kid when she says, like, do you want to watch Y tu mama tambien? It's just like, what? That is why she's a fucking genius. Like, I love Emma Stone. She's so funny.
Well, and especially also, like, later on in the skit where it's her talking to, like, the other kid who's like, why do you keep going over the wells? She's like, well, this is his thing. You have everything. And he has this one thing. That's all he has. Give him that. Which is so funny. But also, he directed the sketch with Ryan Gosling, the Papyrus sketch.
Oh, an iconic, yeah.
Yeah, you've seen that one, of course. Yes.
That one is just incredible.
Right, amazing. The whole why is he so upset? Why did he just picked Papyrus for
he just highlighted it and just picked Papyrus
from the drop menu. But what I like so much about those two sketches as an example of like what Dave McCary is able to do, like on SNL and even here, is that like he's able to like make the emotional reality kind of like grounded in something real, so that the funny stuff really like livens up. It makes all the funny stuff so much more engaging when it's just like you have like Ryan Gosling being so obsessed over just Avatar using Papyrus as its font. And that's like the way it's shot looks like it's an intense drama where he's just like obsessed with this and he can't get over it. There's almost like a conspiracy angle. And Kyle Mooney's in that sketch as the guy keeps looking at like, I know what you did. I know what you did.
And it is the full, like, we are taking this 110% seriously and engaging with it so seriously. And to have Gosling, who is, like, the king of that, right? Like, he is, like, I mean, there's a reason why we all, like, fell in love with him with Barbie, you know, as Ken. Like, he just is so good at delivering the most absurd, ridiculous comedic beats, but with full, like, 100% commitment. Like,
yeah.
The thing I always think about in that scene, not to go on for too long, is him at the like breakfast table with like the cup of coffee, just like playing with the spoon.
What's going on, honey? Nothing. It's all good. Oh, wonderful stuff. Yeah, but of course he did a lot of that stuff on SNL, and during a break in shooting, he ended up doing this with Kyle Mooney. And he's had an interesting career after this, where he hasn't directed another movie since this, but he's had a pretty fruitful career, if I do say so myself, with his production company, Fruit Tree, which he started with, you mentioned her earlier, but his producing partner and wife, Emma Stone, and has been producing stuff like I Saw the TV Glow.
Oh, okay.
And, oh god, what else did they do?
A Real Pain, I believe.
Right, A Real
Obviously,
Pain.
she, like, convinced him, Kieran Culkin, to stay in the movie. Problemista, I believe, is the other one.
Yes.
And then
Poor Things, they also produced.
Yeah, The Curse, I think they probably, right, because she's on that show. So
also The Curse, yeah.
Okay, wow. I did not know that he was Emma Stone's husband and that they were the kind of producing partners behind like those movies. Wow, that's really amazing, actually, huh?
Yes. But before all that, he directed Brigsby Bear, which you kind of mentioned this, Brian, that like you weren't really aware of what the premise of this movie was, and I do want to emphasize this to people. If you are listening to this and you have not seen Brigsby Bear, I would firmly recommend seeing it, because I also had a similar thing of like when this came out, I remember all the hullabaloo about it was like, oh, it sounded like an interesting kind of, sort of image to base the movie around, with like the Brigsby Bear character and all this other stuff, and that Kyle Mooney was like, it was his big movie in the middle of what I would call this SNL madness, but also Mark Hamill was in it, and I was very curious about that, because this is also right around the time where it's post The Force Awakens and it's before The Last Jedi. So he was kind of like in a weird almost comeback phase of his live action career after being obviously a voice actor for so long, mainly for like the last decade and a half or so prior. And when you find out what his role is and what this movie is, it is much more fascinating and dark than you would ever anticipate it being.
Yeah, I mean, like, I that was also the big thing I remember around this time the movie came out, was like, oh, Mark Hamill is in a supporting role in this movie, and it's like, yeah, like I think he had been in some movies here and there, but like, this really was him kind of having a comeback. Like, there was the whole like, I remember those pictures of him like with Daisy Ridley on his back, on his like shoulders, like carrying her on the set of Last Jedi and stuff. We're happy to see that, and yeah, but this movie starts, and I was like, is this fucking Room? the Brie Larson movie? Like it's all I could think. I was like, is this Room meets like 10 Cloverfield Lane or something? Like, what is this movie? It's so strange. I thought it was about like a TV show, and then yeah, I think it starts off in this very dark and kind of weird way, but I think we'll talk about it, but I think one of the really good things this movie does is balance the kind of like indie drama, which can often be kind of dark side of things, right? The Sundance kind of side of things as well, with the fun energy of SNL, right? There's a lot of like the camaraderie of building something together, of coming together and doing something creative, of doing something goofy together, and it balances those two things like really well. But the beginning is definitely very jarring of like, this is not what I thought this movie was about, and it's very kind of jarring, but it eventually I think settles into a really good kind of groove, which again we'll get into, but yeah, what a strange beginning.
Yeah, I mean, basic premise of this movie, just we follow James Pope, who was initially introduced in his bedroom watching Brigsby Bear, the titular show within the movie. Which is this old kind of like VHS-looking fantasy sci-fi show about a bear who has to fight against the evil sun snatcher character who appears in the sky and has like face off with like wizards and uses crystals, but also teaches life lessons. I love what the opening one where it's just like, oh man, I disappointed the galaxy. I can't believe I didn't do great with this particular thing. I wish I would learn a lesson about something. And his compatriots, who are the twins, teach him about like what the sides of an isosceles triangle. It's like a math thing. Just a lesson weirdly shoved in like at the very last second of this episode.
Yeah, there's that one, and there's in this opening sequence, there's one where at the very end they're like, and remember, your familial unit is like is the most important, or something like that. And
do not trust anyone on the outside. Yeah.
Yes.
Very weird kind of cultish sentiments, which is fitting given James is in this odd family unit that involves Mark Hamill as Ted and Jane Addams as April, who raised him in this weird kind of like bunker environment, where they established it like, oh yeah, when you were a baby, a horrible, awful kind of like toxin released into the air, and we can't go outside unless we have gas masks. So you have to stay in this bunker. Ted leaves every day to go to some mysterious work with a gas mask on, and while he's doing that, the April character is teaching James about different like science experiments, trying to resolve what was it, the Ketchum theorem or some shit like that.
Van Smythe, yes,
the Van Smythe theorem, and all this other stuff. And he's either doing his studies or he is watching Brigsby Bear and then going on his little computer and posting different recaps about the various Brigsby Bear episodes. It's his entire obsession. It's his whole world.
I love that computer that he has at the beginning. Very 90s tech, obviously. I love that stuff. I love the webcam setup he's got. It's very cool, I think.
Yes, but early on in the movie, there's a point where James goes above ground, past the kind of they call it the pier, which is the little like deck, kind of like atrium almost looking thing that they usually go outside to like look at stuff, which includes the fucking animatronic fox. Which just the aesthetic of all this I think is incredible. I love the look of kind of like that in the Brigsby Bear show, the kind of like weird, almost like Disney animatronic. Probably the first time I actually ever heard Kyle Mooney was, I've mentioned this show before, but Podcast The Ride. He's been a guest on that a lot. He has kind of like he loves theme park stuff, and you can tell he kind of like that obsession with like theme park animatronics is very like adamant throughout like a lot of the like invented stuff in Brigsby Bear. But yeah, he's so at one point James goes up outside of this pier and goes into the outside with like a gas mask on when he sees a bunch of police sirens and a bunch of cops arrive, arrest April and Ted, and take James back. And as he learns from Detective Vogel, played by Greg Kinnear in this movie, he was kidnapped as a child from his family by Ted, who is revealed to be the inventor of, what was it, the talking tiger,
like Tony the talking tiger or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, this like tiger toy that was like very popular in the 80s, and he had used all that money to create this underground bunker. And Jane had apparently stolen young James as a baby, as an infant, and they raised him as their own. And now James is in his 30s and returns back to his birth parents, who are played by Michaela Watkins, another SNL veteran, as Louise, and Matt Walsh as Greg. No, not that one. The funny one. The good one. The good Matt Walsh. I feel so bad for that dude. He's a very funny, talented comedian. He's very good in this movie as well. I hate that he has that fucking that name associated with that other fucking asshole.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he ends up going back to his parents and his sister, Aubrey, played by Ryan Simpkins, and he tries to, kind of adjust back to this, try and just to like the actual reality that we all live in, but also he's still obsessed with Brigsby Bear, and he's finding out that like, oh, Brigsby Bear was the only show he was aware of that ever existed. That's why he loved it so much. It was the one kind of media that he had. And there's all this other stuff that people like watch, like television shows and movies, and he ends up becoming friendly with Spencer, played by Jorge Lenderborg Jr., who is a friend of Aubrey's, who wants to get into doing like special effects stuff, particularly like animation stuff on his computer. And James resolves to be like, you know what? How about I make a Brigsby Bear movie that resolves all of this lore that I've been like so obsessed with all this time? And yeah, it's an incredibly fascinating way to make a like, hey, let's make a movie, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, like, ultimately that is what this movie is, right? It is a movie about kind of DIY filmmaking, but in typical kind of SNL vehicle fashion, taken at a weird angle, with this kind of like weird kidnapping and like this whole kind of Stockholm syndrome / like, we'll talk sort of about the way that this show is both kind of this like reminder of what happened, especially to like his real parents, but also is like the only kind of comfort that he has because he doesn't know anything. And I think when he gets brought back to his real family and like we do the whole like, oh, he's now going to try and like fit back into society, that's where I start to get like really worried. And I'm like, yeah. is this going to be the sort of like secondhand embarrassment thing where, we just see him try to be awkwardly not know things, and then he gets like bullied or beat up or something like that. And no, it's kind of the best and most surprising thing about this movie is that it doesn't do that. He actually makes like friends, and the Spencer character, who is like, again, you think that like he's gonna show him this, and the Spencer character will be like, that's stupid, that's for kid, whatever. But he's like, hey, this is cool. Like, hey, we should do this together. Like, come on. I think it's a really smart thing that this movie does, where there's some awkwardness, but I think it doesn't ever really go into the secondhand embarrassment thing. It mostly is just like really funny, and it uses the awkwardness to be really funny in a lot of ways that I think is like, again, I kind of let out like a really deep sigh after that. I was like, oh, thank God. Like, this is not good. That's not what this movie is going to be. It's going to be a bit more weirdly grounded in its emotions, you know, even though it has this kind of very weird and absurd kind of plot. It's a thing that I think really works about like the best kind of comedies and the best kind of like these kind of like Sundance-y kind of things is like they can be ridiculous, they can be heightened, but the emotions have to be real and they have to be there. And I think that's what like, yeah, the movie does like really, really, really well.
Yeah, and I mean, to say we might explore this maybe a bit later, but the biggest thing where I was very worried about this is I'll just say with the character that Alexa Demi plays, Meredith.
Mm-hmm.
There's a subplot with that where when I first watched this movie, I was like, oh dear God, no, what are we doing? What's happening here? And they really do a great job of running up to a certain line and then skirting around it, and there was all this pretty like pat, and it's not gonna go any further than it could go, which would be really fucked up if they did.
Yeah, and especially because like Alexa Demi, like she also has a similar kind of plotline in mid-90s, the Jonah Hill directed movie.
I did not see that one.
Another sort of like kid very obsessed with the 90s, but a similar sort of like weird age gap plotline thing that is, I will just say, not handled the best in that movie. I think this is a better case scenario for that, but I was very aware of that when she popped up on screen. And also I was like, oh, it's Alexa Demi from Euphoria. Like, that's, hey, like, you know, I'm always kind of interested in the alumni of Euphoria, even though I think that show is like complete garbage. But yeah, she's very fun in this movie, by the way. I think like that character, you're expecting her to be like the mean girl or like the bully or something, and like she is not. Like, she's really nice, and they have like a good sort of friendship eventually, and it's like it's really nice, which I think is like it is handled quite well. So yeah.
I mean, we might as well just talk about the scene where there's a party that goes on. He's dragged over to this party by Aubrey, who initially promised her mother that they were going to a football game. It's like, we're not going to a football game. We're going to a party. We're just with some friends. Don't just act normal and don't tell anybody how old you are and all that. They pick up Alexa Demi, and there's a certain point where he takes some drugs and he starts tripping, and she ends up taking him over into I think like the kid's bedroom, right, with like the fucking car bed and shit like that, and tries to tell him to calm him down. And, you know, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going pretty wild. And it's like, so have you ever been with a girl before? And he said, like, I mean, only on the internet, but that was my fake parents playing games with me, which is one of many lines that are like so incredibly fucking sad in context that Mooney manages to make still very funny just with his delivery. And there's a point where, like, you know, they kiss, and there's a point where it seems like she's going to be reaching down his pants. Within like a few seconds, he like gets up, like, thank you, I'm sorry, I have to leave, goodbye, and he isn't able to handle that, which is like such a moment where I'm like, that could go so fucking wrong. And the way they handle it there, I think, is just skirting the line. And then later on, when they're making the movie, and he just talks to her about, like, listen, this is going to be hard for me to say, but I know we had fun, you know, be in sexual contact with each other, but I can't marry you. I'm so sorry. It's like, oh, no, don't worry. Yeah, we won't get married. Like, oh, thank God. I didn't want to marry her, but I mean, we could keep still doing this. No, we're not. We're not going to do that. Okay, fine. That's it. And that's as much as we need of that.
Yeah, I think Mooney does a good job at balancing the, like, this is an adult with the mind of a child still. He balances that, like, very well, like, surprisingly well, because, again, like, you get a lot of that, like, especially with the way he, like, when they first bring him home and he's just, like stuttering and talking about, like, Brigsby Bear constantly, and you're like, oh, okay, this is like right, like a kid in a man's body kind of thing, and like it is handled way more deftly than you would expect because of, like, again, this type of like storyline and how quickly it can kind of go into like just some weird places, and I yeah, the way that he kind of balances it, and I think like that line where he says like, yeah, I can't marry you, and she's like, what are you talking about, like we're not gonna get married, is yeah, really really funny. I think he's able to sort of make this like both incredibly funny and also still kind of have that underlying like sadness, which I think applies to someone like, it's what works about someone like Adam Sandler, right? Is that he is like goofy and funny, but there's something kind of like sad there about him still, and I think that like that balance is like really key to what makes like the movie work.
They managed to do that also without making it feel like, oh, is this going into like almost bad take on like autism kind of angle? Because there's a version of this where it feels like that, and it doesn't quite feel like that. It just feels like a person who is truly completely isolated from all society and is just doing stuff. Like the opening bits I love, where like he ends up with his Matt Walsh and his actual family. And they start like they do the thing at dinner where he's kind of praying, but it's a really low whisper, and then he like shakes everybody's hand because that's like part of the weird cult ritual that we saw earlier with like Mark Hamill and all them and all that. Or even later on when like he's starting to get used to society, but it doesn't quite fit. Like there's a bit where Aubrey comes up to him, it's just like, why are you so weird? And he's like, well, I was abducted and I lived under in a bunker. That might have something to do with it. It's like where he's just very plainly like speaking about this like horrible tragic event in his life, but being like, yeah, I don't know, that happened to me, but I'm gonna still keep moving on. And I like how he even brings up certain times, like when he's doing the whole storyboard pitch for Brigsby Bear to the Spencer character, and near the end of it, he talks about like, and maybe at the end he goes off with his real bear parents, because when you think about it, maybe what he did wasn't that bad. He still is like attached to this old reality because it's all he really knew. There's a real sense of like this tragic growth of trying to like get beyond it. The whole movie is basically about that. Like him making this Brigsby Bear movie is him like creatively expressing something when he's attached to the show, but it also feels like him taking what was basically foisted upon him in this horrible situation and being able to like get it out of his system, basically. Being able to be like, I'm taking this thing that I love so much that was just given to me as almost like a propaganda tool and making my own art out of it. It's such a beautiful way to like express all of this while still being like a very funny character who will like just has so many funny fucking lines in this movie.
Yeah, it has this very kind of dark like setup, I think, and then it becomes very much about that. It becomes very much about like, what does this person do now that they have like never seen the outside world and like have been like basically Stockholm syndrome like from like birth, basically. And like again, yes, it deals with that, and it becomes more about like, yeah, this sense of closure or this sense of like finality or something that he needs to do. Now I have some issues with the way that other characters handle this, and I don't know. You would think that like Claire Danes, who plays the therapist that has been kind of assigned to him to like kind of process this, would kind of see that he's doing this and kind of like encourage it a little bit, not like lock him up this at the hospital, I guess. But again, this is kind of the way that these kind of comedies work. It's nitpicky, I get it, but I don't know. I just kind of.
Yeah, it feels like they kind of have to have like the sort of like what would usually be like in an SNL comedy, like the two characters who are like buds end up dispersing from each other at the end of the second act is replaced with like, oh, he has to go off to this institute and kind of be like locked up for a bit, and then he'll end up coming back to his family like later and all this other stuff. Yeah, I don't love that plot. I agree with you, even though it does immediately give us another SNL cast member who pops up, Andy Samberg.
Yes,
who's very fun.
Yeah. So I think like I could have used way more Samberg. That's also another small issue I have with this movie. When he shows up, I was like, here we fucking go, like rubbing my hands together, like this is it. And then he's got some funny bits, but I really did want more of him. And it feels like the movie kind of needs that like, the sort of like second act conflict to sort of, push us into the final bit of the movie. But it's a bit clunky, I think. But love Claire Danes. Love to see her in this movie. I'm sure we'll talk about more of the cameos here in a little bit, but
I mean, I will say by contrast, I do really like the dynamic of like the family unit who brings him back in with like Michaela Watkins and Matt Walsh and Ryan Simpkins. I think that trio is like exactly what I would expect from like this horrible situation where Michaela Watkins is like very nurturing and attempting to kind of like bridge a connection, and so is Matt Walsh, which is like I love the bit where he's going through all the things like, oh, we'll go swimming, and we'll go, we'll have like a water balloon fight, we'll do this other stuff, and it's like, you're so obsessed with water. Why are you doing this?
really
Like, well, I'll balance it out with some land activities, which is so funny. But it feels like very like natural, especially when like Kyle becomes so obsessed with like the movie element of it. And his dad just like wants to connect with him, like, let's shoot some hoops, let's go to the movies, all this other stuff. But he ends up feeling like this disconnect that like resolves because like he's like becomes part of this obsession that they feel is like, oh, are you going too far back into this thing that like was a tool by your captors basically to like try and brainwash you. It feels like a genuine, real like family dynamic that is, once again, the emotions are very well rooted, even though there is like still funny stuff, like the bit where him and Michaela Watkins go to the grocery store. And the one guy's like, oh, you're the guy who got kidnapped, right? In the Brigsby Bear thing. Oh my God, I love it. Hey, can you take a picture of us? Like, yeah, okay. You're doing the thumbs up? Yeah, okay. There we go.
Yeah, I mean, that scene does nail a lot of the kind of like the conflict within the family unit pretty well as well, where like the minute that guy comes up and is like, hey, you're the bear guy, you can see Michaela Watkins' face go kind of like, oh God. Like, it's, again, another reminder of the tragedy that has happened, as like her and Matt Walsh are just kind of like, no, we can move on now. This is like, we can go past this. This is in the past. But yeah, which ultimately is like, it is what the movie's about. I also I like the Aubrey character, the sister here, because again, that's a character where you can, like, so many movies do this where it's like the sibling who like pressures, like, again, the party scene where she takes him to the party. You think it's going to be this like really awful situation where she abandons him or she gives him drugs like unwillingly or something, and like or she's like mean to him all the time, and it's like, she's not really mean to him. She is just kind of like awkward, or just kind of like, I believe as she puts it later in the movie, she's like, I'm sorry I've been like weird or whatever to you. Where she's like, yeah, she's not like antagonistic, but she is more just like, I don't know this person. Like, they are he's my brother, but I've never met him. There's that kind of unfamiliarity there that like builds to like, by the end of the movie, they're like genuinely on great terms, and it's like really heartwarming to see like towards the end of the movie.
No, I completely agree. Yeah, especially with like, it feels more believable like with the Aubrey character of like a teenager who maybe like it seems they don't like spell this out exactly, but it seems very much like her parents didn't talk about this whole situation, this tragedy, and It's very clear that like, oh, I was kind of like almost like a replacement baby because you were kidnapped, kind of thing. There's that animosity that just builds up on a very natural level, especially for a teenager dealing with a situation. But I do agree that like you can tell like they grow kinder toward each other. She grows like much more loving to him, and especially that bit when they're filming the movie and the eye falls off the Brigsby Bear costume and she fixes it, is so goddamn sweet. I fucking love that moment so much. That really shows like the two of them. And I also like the fact that like with Ryan Simpkins, she does kind of feel like her and Kyle Mooney could be related. There is like a weird, almost like similar like facial structure, and even like the glasses I think also helps with that. They do feel like where they could be like siblings separated from each other for a while.
Well, and they feel like, and I'm speaking here as an only child, so take this with a grain of salt, but like it also just feels like there's a believability with the sort of like much older sibling and younger sibling, that kind of dynamic that like, I don't know, it's handled really, really well, I think, in sort of like portraying like, oh, he is like an adult and she is still kind of like in high school or, late high school. That
really spreads out to like the various different people. Like we mentioned Meredith, but even the Spencer character, Jorge Linderberger, I love that relationship like you were mentioning, where like he sees him at the party and recognizes like, oh wait, you're Aubrey's brother. Hey man, you know what? Let's hang out. Let's be cool. I can like help you out with like, this is your first party. I'm gonna make it a good experience for you. And then ends up going sideways.
I love his line where he's like, "Do you want a beer?" And Kyle Mooney's like, "Yes, I would like one of that." It's really funny.
There's a lot of that. Like later on too, after like the whole explosion thing happens, and he talks to Beck Bennett about like, everything was my fault. The explosions and the drugs and the alcohols. I'm responsible for all of it.
I'm sorry to America is such a great line.
I'm sorry to you, and I'm sorry to America. Yes. But I like that too. I like that. It feels like a genuine friendship, like he found his first friend, and it feels like very earnest, especially like when he trips out and then he like wakes up in Spencer's bedroom. It's like, oh hey, there he is. You're good. Don't worry, everything's fine. It feels like very like genuine, and like, as you mentioned, like they build up the whole like camaraderie around Brigsby Bear, and he is the one that's uploading the show on YouTube, which I think an underrated aspect of this movie that I haven't even heard people who have seen it talk about. It does the whole like, oh, something becomes viral, I think better than most other movies that do that too. Because there's like one little montage where you show people watching it, and it also feels believable that, like, yeah, this would become like a weird viral sensation if people uploaded it. That like, oh, the weird dude who created the tiger doll, who ended up like living in a bunker and kidnapped a kid, made a whole show, and the show has enough like this interesting aesthetic element to like get people's interest. And I think it feels much more believable as opposed to like the one I keep pointing out to. I think I pointed out on the show before, in fucking Chef, Jon Favreau's Chef.
Oh, with all the tweet likes and everything that's aged so well.
Oh, good fucking God. Where all the birds fly up into the fucking sky. Bullshit. Jesus Christ. Much better handled here in Brigsby Bear.
Yeah. And I like that it is this kind of like, there's not a scene where Kyle Mooney goes on to like fucking late night with like Jimmy Fallon or something. It just becomes this like viral internet thing, and it's handled very well. To get ahead of the kind of cameo discussion, that's the montage where we see Julio Torres in the barbershop.
Yes.
Which I was like, oh, it's Julio Torres. That's really cool to see. Yeah, it's an element that I think like they also just don't make into a huge deal. Again, where it's not like I said, like it's not like he ends up on late night or something. He just kind of like it's for that grocery store scene where someone kind of recognizes him and stuff. So there's a good kind of payoff with that.
And they even have the offhand line about like they got a bunch of free money from people on the internet. For Kyle Mooney's thing, but I that even makes sense. Like, that they would have some kind of like crowdfunding thing based on this. Like, oh, he wants to make a movie, and it feels like people would like get behind that kind of element. Even like the final theater scene, which we'll get to. But yeah, how do you feel about the Spencer character though in general?
He's great. Again, like it's a character. It's kind of the thing with what I was fearing for this movie, where it's like, oh, this is going to be a character who like. Especially when he sort of shows him the tapes, like he brings him like, okay, I got volumes 14 to 25 here. This is really when the show got good, which is also a funny line. You just expect that character to be like, no, this is stupid, this is lame, like whatever. And no, he's like genuinely like engaging with it, and like there is a sort of nice friendship that forms there. I really like that. That is kind of like, I really love the way it's kind of upended with the like explosion scene where he's like, were you just making me carry explosions around? And Kyle Mooney has one of my favorite lines in this entire movie where he's like, and it's practical effects, they're a dying art form,
Yes.
So good.
Which, while we're talking about practical effects and stuff like that, how do you feel about the aesthetics of the Brigsby Bear show?
Oh, I mean, it's so cool. I mean, I remember seeing the image of like the moon, like the fucking like George Méliès like moon kind of thing.
Excuse me, it's Mr. Sunsnatcher, the great villain of the Brigsby Bear franchise.
Of course. I love this kind of thing, and like we just saw this in a movie last year I saw the TV Glow, right? Kind of that like 80s 90s kind of TV that's like for kids, but it's like has a message, it wants to deliver. It's got like a moral at the end of it. I really like it, and I like this sort of like part like Masters of the Universe, but also part like obviously like Star Trek or something like that. Like there's a lot of like, it isn't like a 1-to-1 of like what this show is supposed to be, kind of like, I don't know, is there something that it kind of like is more similar to, or like what does it kind of like remind you of in particular at all? Like what is it kind of trying to do?
I get some of that, but there were also other shows that like were at before my time, but I just have very early memories of like the aesthetics being so weird. There's a Winnie the Pooh show from I believe like the 80s. I forgot what it's called, but it's one where it's like all of them are portrayed by like people in suits, kind of like it's like live action. And I think the look of Brigsby Bear, I think, reminded me particularly a lot of that sentiment, where it's like there is this kind of thing that feels like, oh, it has like,
oh Jesus,
yeah, you're looking at them now. Yeah, it's weird, right? You would agree with me that also that the aesthetic feels consistent with Brigsby Bear.
Yeah, or like I think of like this is obviously closer to kind of my age, but like Teletubbies or like
Right.
obviously like
Yes.
Barney or something like that, right? The kind of creepiness of like someone in a suit like that. It's kind of
Excuse me, you're talking to someone who was first obsession as a very small child was Barney the dinosaur.
Oh well, don't worry. That upcoming movie is it's coming soon.
That's so fucking nuts. That it's like
Crazy.
Iowa DeBerry is like gonna
Yes.
write and star in it, and Daniel Kaluuya is producing it.
Yeah, and
Weird.
he's been like the shepherd of it like for like a while now. So
Very curious to see whatever
so
the fuck that ends up
fascinated.
being. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, that kind of aesthetic where there is like, there's something kind of fascinating about it where it feels just like it's close to our reality because there are live action people in it, but it is just like slightly off the kind of uncanny valley thing. It just like sticks in your head, especially as a kid when you're trying to process like what reality is, and you're just like watching the show all the time, particularly in like, you know, Kyle Mooney's case, this is the only thing you're watching as like the one kind of constant of like, yes, this is like the thing that we love so much. This is like the whole Brigsby element of it. I can believe if this was the only show you had, it would be like your entire life and you would be obsessed with it. And even that kind of like fan culture obsession, which this movie feels like it's kind of like at the right spot to like comment on that, but not feel, you know, too much in the like, oh, like we're once again very nostalgic about this in a weird way. It's a movie kind of about that weird nostalgia, but like focused in a way of like, well, let me take this like obsession I have and like try and, you know, work through it and especially introduce it to other people in this way. I just love that it's much more based in kind of like a healthier thing. It goes from like obsessive toxicity to like him trying to like spread the word of Brigsby Bear and like what he views it as, despite, you know, all the odd implications of it. And I just love also during that montage the weird hints of like the cultishness of it, which would be like the reason I would watch any of this shit. It's just like, what is this fucking weird cult guy like putting into this kid show for his fucking kidnapped son? Where there's the bit of it's like, and remember, only touch your penis twice a day. Which is like a random line that pops up. I think also what really helps and benefits is because this was like a weird DIY thing. You have Mark Hamill doing all the different voices, like of Sun Snatcher, of Brigsby Bear, which makes it kind of genius that like the ultimate resolve of like him, like, you know, Kyle Mooney confronting this captor of his is like, will you help me out by recording all the lines? I can't get the voices right. That's ingenious casting for Mark Hamill.
I mean, the casting of Mark Hamill and his sort of voice background is amazing. But also, I think that that weirdly ties into the idea of fandom the movie has, and the idea of like this kind of not just like the toxic fandom, but I think the like people who are still sort of like stuck in their childhood when viewing this sort of like pop culture. I think it's very interesting to come out the same year as The Last Jedi, you know?
Right, which would happen like shortly after this movie came out.
Right, so I think there's also some interesting casting there. Yeah, that scene with Mark Hamill towards the end where Kyle Mooney is sort of like, I have a question for you, and Mark Hamill is like, I don't know why we did it. Like, she just came home and I saw you there, and Kyle Mooney's like, yeah, I wasn't talking about that. I just want you to. Again, it's a really smart way that like the other characters around him and like the family and like Greg Kinnear's character are clearly being very like sensitive to him about this, but to him it is just like, yeah, no, I don't care about the kidnapping. That's not what I'm talking about. I want you to help me with the voice of this, and it like again it doesn't view this character the Mark Hamill character as like sympathetic, but it is kind of like the way that Mooney's character is kind of using the terrible thing that this person did, but for the sense of closure that it's like a lot more emotionally intelligent than you would expect from what, like, especially just looking at like the poster here, which I've been staring at. It just like looks ridiculous, but like, yeah, the movie has a lot of that emotional depth that is like surprising, and yeah, that scene is so great, you know, to just see like. Also, to see Hamill do that voice like there is really, really fun. He's just, God, what a great voice actor.
Yeah, I do love that. It could be like I agree. You know, in a worse movie, it would be like, oh, kind of like a redemption thing for him, but it really isn't. It's kind of like, well, you just do me this favor. This is all I want out of you at this point, is to be able to like close this off about Brigsby Bear. And it's like, I like that they do give him the kind of one bit where he's like, well, I do want to see what you did with it. I do like that.
Yes,
It's like as
that's
the
really
creator
funny.
of this thing, it's like, I want to like dig through the script basically and do this. By the way, great audio for recording in like the middle of like a prison like visitation
Oh, yeah.
center or whatever when they actually had the movie later. But yeah, and I also what I really like about sort of with McCary's filmmaking is the way that he contrasts the real world with like the Brigsby Bear kind of world, that we, whether it's in the movie or with like the aesthetic of the show that we see the clips and stuff. I really love that, like, that stuff is, like, depicted in a much more, like, bright, kind of, like, overtly, almost, like, shining, optimistic kind of way, which contrasts with, like, the real world is not, like, totally muted, but has, like, much more, like, chill, familiar, like, grounded aesthetic to it. I think he does a great job of, like, contrasting it without going too far in either direction. There feels like there's a similar color palette, but it doesn't feel like it's, oh, we're contrasting too much. It's like, oh, the real world is, like, Fincher-esque. And, like, completely dark and abysmal looking.
Yeah. It does remind me, though, of maybe one of my favorite lines. The one of my hardest laughs during the movie was during the party scene when he's kind of, like, running in the woods, like, tripping, and he sees the moon, the Mark Hamill, like, moon, which is a really fun bit, but also has, again, the line that Hamill, I guess, delivers there, where he's like, "Did you and Meredith smash?" It's just so fucking funny to me.
I also, even right before that, where he's just like, I can't believe you're this fucking wasted right now. It's also very funny. And I mean, also the shout out, even though she's only in really the beginning of the movie, but Jane Addams as his cohort, I think is very good. Particularly, it's just like, we appreciate how creative you are for like your investment in Brigsby Bear, but also you could be using this toward your studies, like solving the Van Smythe theorem and stuff like that. Like it's pretty funny. We haven't mentioned really that much Greg Kinnear, who plays the detective character, who is a wonderful presence in this movie. I think so great. Like early on, that scene where he's like tries to give him the coke, trying to do like kind of a good cop thing, just like, hey, you know what? I have my private stash. This one's just for you. No one's gonna say anything.
Made me want a coke.
Right? A great product placement, really. When you've been stuck in a fucking bunker your entire life and your entire reality shatters, you know what'll help you out? Nice coke and a glass bottle.
Yeah, and a glass bottle too. I love Coca-Cola cinema.
But that whole thing where he's, trying to lay him down gently, and even another great line that like could be skirting some uncomfortable territory, where he's just like, James, did they touch you? And he says, yeah. And he's okay, it's fine. No one's gonna judge you. It's all good. And it's like, yeah, they would do this, and then he shakes his hand. A lot of that.
Yeah.
So funny. And just Kinnear's like reaction to it, it's so endearing. But then as it goes along and you find out like, oh, he's an aspiring actor, and he just that little monologue from The Tempest, yes, which I love that he does like the first like 3 or 4 lines, and he's like, I forget the rest. But it's my thing. And when he actually becomes part of the movie and does like the wizard thing, his scene where he does it is like so good. And he's like genuinely invested in it. It's such a wonderful little performance.
I love that he's like, can you give me one more take? I think I can really take this to a new direction or something. It's
whoa, another one. Okay. Like, just the implication that they've been only doing one take for every scene.
Real after Clint Eastwood's heart there.
I was curious to hear Kyle Mooney say, like, all right, that'll do.
Enough of this.
Enough of this. I'm sure whatever fake babies in Brigsby Bear is a lot better than American Sniper.
God. While we're on Kinnear, though, I really like the scene where he kind of delivers the evidence to Kyle Mooney's house and has the conversation with Matt Walsh, and like the kind of like the very conflicting kind of feelings that like he has there, where Matt Walsh's character is like, yeah, we're kind of trying to like not discuss the Brigsby Bear thing, so this isn't helping. But like thank you for the sentiment, like it's nice. And so like again, the way the movie doesn't like fully lean into like Matt Walsh being like, stay away from my son or something like that. It's a lot more nuanced and a lot more like I don't know, emotional, I guess, than you would expect.
And the contrast being like Greg Kinnear reacting like, oh yeah, in retrospect, that does seem kind of shitty of me. I'm sorry, man. I just wanted to help him out with his movie. He's making a movie, which I love that. Matt Walsh doesn't even know about the movie until that point.
Yeah, I mean, which the great sequence earlier where Kyle Mooney is like, how to make a movie, how to like storyboarding for like, which I think like is some of the best like ways of representing this idea that like if you want to make a movie or if you want to like find out how to make like how to do filmmaking, like you can find a lot of it online. Like it is very accessible. It's one of the only movies I think that like actually engages with that idea. I think it's the scene where the eye falls off, but like where Kyle Mooney is like, I love making movies, and like I'm just such a sucker for that kind of thing. Like, you know, a movie about filmmaking, but also a movie where people are like, making movies is fun. This is such a fun process. It's creativity, it's collaboration and stuff.
Well, especially how sweet it is when he escapes from the institution, which I just want to shout my favorite, funniest bit of this whole fucking movie, where like I had to pause and like laugh for like 2 minutes. This is a bit where he's talking to Andy Samberg about like, yeah, I'm going to escape out of here. He's like, so how are you going to do it? It's pretty complicated. Smash cut to TV going through the fucking window is so goddamn funny to me. And it feels exactly like the kind of like the thing that like would work for like an SNL sketch in particular, that kind of like fast timing. But then Mooney escaping, going back to the house and discovering that his family is trying to, you know, continue doing the movie for him is so fucking sweet and is so endearing. And that Matt Walsh even says like, you know what, I kept trying to like, you know, implement my way of hanging out with you, but it could be a great way for the family to actually like unite with each other. I almost wish there was more of that, because I think they have like a little montage after the point where they're still doing stuff. But I wish there was a bit more of like the family unit kind of like participating and helping out with all this. It's so sweet, because you even get that too earlier on when like he's doing it with Spencer and his buddies, like when the one guy puts on the weird like bucket helmet thing, and then it's like moving around, and Kyle Mooney like is showing him like, no, this is how this character would walk, basically, because he's the expert on Brigsby Bear. That's like, no, you have to do this kind of body language with it.
Oh, I love all the times when Kyle Mooney is like Greg Kinnear will bring over a piece of evidence and he'll be like, oh, the story crystal or whatever.
Right.
It's like the weird lore for the show. It's so funny.
Yeah, or like, oh, the staff of Izaroth. I can't believe it. And I love that even like when other people see these props, they're like, oh, this is pretty cool. It's like you're mentioning, there is kind of like a weird, infectious charm that Brigsby Bear like brings out in other people. It doesn't feel like it's insincere, like, oh, we have to be nice to him, so we'll say this looks cool. It's like everyone seems genuinely invested in doing this in a way that like the best kind of movies about making movies can do. But yeah, you know, I guess just shout out a couple other people we've kind of mentioned, like Beck Bennett is one of the other detectives.
Yeah.
Much more straight-laced character than Beck Bennett would usually play, like on SNL and stuff. But he's very good, particularly the bit where he's like interrogating him, and you mentioned like the "I'm sorry to you" and "I'm sorry to America" bit. But he's like, you know, I watched some of the tapes. And it's like, oh yeah, which episodes did you watch? I don't know. There was one where like he faced off against a wizard, and then they taught him multiplication. Oh yeah, that's one of the ones for like babies. You know,
that's really funny. A lot
later. Yeah. But like even that guy was like much more straight laced, and in theory would be a guy who like, oh, is it? My fear when I was first watching is like, oh, is this guy gonna end up, you know, pounding all of the evidence, and then also like getting Greg Kinnear fired, maybe all this other stuff. But I like that it doesn't end up happening. Like they deal with it on a much more emotionally true level, like you're talking about, or even like there's a scene earlier with Greg Kinnear and him, which is very good, where he's like, you know, maybe you could get access to some of the props and stuff. It's like, well, that's all evidence for investigation. I can't really like get it out of there necessarily. It's like, okay, and then he gets a crumpled up couple of dollars, puts it on the desk, and he's like, what about this? No, I'm not gonna accept that. That's fine, I'm just a bit richer now, and he puts it back in his pocket.
I think that's like what you're saying about like the Beck Bennett character, like that whole like plot line that the movie doesn't do. I think there's also that thing because like every fucking comedy now is like 2 hours long, and this movie is like 90 minutes and some change, maybe. Like,
yeah, like 97 minutes long.
It's not quick, yeah. It's very simple, and they keep things very streamlined, and it's something that like a lot of comedies kind of struggle with, of like unnecessary plot points, unnecessary like conflict or something like that like this movie just avoids, because it's like, no, we know what we're doing. This is like, yes, this has this very weird kind of high concept thing going on, but it is just a movie about filmmaking, and it knows what it's doing a lot more, and I think that that's what makes it work better than a lot of like recent comedies as well.
Yeah, and it would be it's interesting too with that, because I think it's a key aspect of this kind of tonal balance is really contrasted when you watch Y2K, which Mooney directed and wrote, which that movie feels like it's much more into like the silly direction, and apparently Mooney had to envision this in a more silly vein, in a much more silly kind of idea. But Kevin Costello and David McCary were very adamant about like, no, we want to keep some of like the emotional grounding here because they both had grown up in like strict Christian households. And so you kind of get that mix where there's like, we can have like these funny elements, but also when like the character drama has to be like sincere and work really well. And I think a scene that really exemplifies that, we should mention, in the Brigsby Bear show, there are these twin characters, these two twin girls, who are shown throughout the show. And he ends up finding the actress, Whitney, played by Caitlin Scheel, who is Kyle Mooney's actual wife.
Really?
Yes.
That lucky motherfucker. I love Caitlin Scheel.
Right, but I just like the fact that scene where like he finds her and he admits, just like, hey, would you maybe want to come back to this? And he admits like, I love you. Like you get the hints early on that like she is like the biggest crush you could possibly have because she's like the only other woman he's seen through like the Brigsby Bear show. That's such a scene that is like such a one, like you mentioned, delicate tightrope to walk. Yeah. But ends up working out so well where Whitney is like clearly distant from him and is like, look, I'm so sorry that this like was foisted upon you. I only did it for extra cash. It feels like so like genuine and sweet from her end. And from his end also, there's just the thing I'm like, hey, you want to like do the thing and like admitting his crush, but then the total like stomach kind of collapse that you can see on his face where she says like, oh yeah, I gotta pick up my kid and stuff. It's like, oh, she has like a whole life. She isn't just like this object of his affection. You can tell in that moment that he realizes that, but at the same time he's like, I still can't not admit that like I loved you for so long and I just have to get this out, that like this is part of like the closure element of it. And the bit where like the fucking sirens come up and she's like, oh, are those for you? Yeah, ever since I got out I've been kind of an outlaw.
I love when he comes out like, no tackling this time, please.
Yeah, right, with the hands up. And even earlier when like he does get tackled, he's like, oh no, we don't need any police help, thank you. It's fine. These guys are cool. That's a good.
Yeah, and again, we've mentioned a lot of this, but like especially during the scene with Caitlin Scheel, like you are expecting her to be like fuck off, dude. Like I don't, whatever. Like that was some dumb thing I did, but the way she is like both genuinely like upset about it, like upset that like that she unknowingly kind of contributed to this like kidnapping situation is really like heartfelt, and then but also her genuine kind of like confusion of like who this guy is, where like I love when he asks like in Brigsby Bear volume like whatever, how did you know this or something, and she's just like I don't remember, I have no idea what you're talking about. But again, it's handled in this like really really gentle way, and I love Caitlin Scheel. Anytime she pops up in any movie, whether it's like You're Next or Queen of Earth or She Dies Tomorrow, like and she's done like a few of the Alex Ross Perry movies. She's in the comedy, the Tim Heidecker Rick Alverson movie, which is great. Like I just love when she pops up in things. She has such a specific, I don't know what it is about her, but I've just like always been like interested in her as an actor whenever she pops up and stuff. So yeah, I was really happy to see her, and yeah, that's it's a really kind of sweet scene, which again, a lot of this movie is like surprisingly very sweet and gentle and nice.
Yeah, I also love like she establishes like, oh, he only told me that it was like for Canadian public access, which 100% feels accurate for what Brigsby Bear could be, because there's also this other element of Brigsby Bear that like it feels like a show that like, in the way of like Kyle Mooney's like so obsessed with it, like any show where like you have very specific memories of it, but you can't really like share it with other people who are like, what the fuck are you talking about? I've never heard of this show. What are you talking about? That doesn't mean anything. You've had, I don't know if you've had that similar thing.
No,
like,
yeah.
This vague childhood memory, and it's like, oh yeah, did anyone else watch this show? Like, no. Wait, I've never heard of this. What are you referring to?
Yeah, again, what we were talking about earlier, like the specificity of Brigsby Bear, the way it is not just a one-to-one of like, it's Barney, it's this, it's kind of an amalgamation of a lot of things with its own kind of like funny and silly kind of lore that I love, that we see a little bit in like the movie towards the end.
And I just also love the design for all the props is phenomenal, particularly like the decision to have like the Brigsby Bear head have like the cassette operation thing, which is good. Which is a great example of like, that's a specific reference to, are you aware of what Teddy Ruxpin is?
name sounds weirdly familiar.
Yeah, this is something also
Googling.
before my time, but I was aware of from like other things, where it's basically like a bear that you would put a cassette in its back and it would like read a story to you.
Okay, I've heard of this. Okay.
Yeah, that's a great example of like implementing kind of the old school kind of like the nostalgic angle of it, but not just saying like, oh, it's like a Teddy Ruxpin kind of thing, and like implementing it, especially that bit where he's just like, oh, the only music I ever listened to was my dad's music, the Beatlers, and he puts the cassette in and it sounds like shit.
Yeah.
So funny. Let's talk about Andy Samberg. He only has a brief part in this movie, but we should have
Yeah.
at least a corner because like a crucial part of SNL in general, especially my period of like loving SNL was like the digital shorts and all that other shit. But it's interesting having him in here because this is also a Lonely Island production, and like Norma Taccone and Kiva Schaffer are both producers on this, along with also not SNL really, but Phil Lord and Chris Miller are also producers.
Right. Yeah.
It feels like it kind of also has a similar kind of like vibe of like Lonely Island without obviously like the crudeness and the crassness of particularly like, but Brigsby Bear feels like it would be a weird Lonely Island digital short kind of angle to it as well. It kind of has that vibe to it. And I can see why Samberg would be interested enough to actually like be a part of this movie, even in a small capacity.
Yeah. I also loved the like Lonely Island Classics logo that comes up, which is like mimicking the Sony Pictures Classics logo. I thought that was really funny. And yeah, I think like, again, I wanted more of him, but I think it is just because he is like such a presence. Like, you know, when he shows up and he's wearing those sunglasses, I was just like, this guy is so fucking charming. I can't get enough of him. But yeah, and I think kind of shows this thing that I only have a vague concept of, but this kind of like Lonely Island people, the Lord and Miller people, like producing these movies from these SNL people, kind of similar to like the Judd Apatow thing. You know, the kind of like
right.
You would produce a lot of these SNL vehicles, or like the Will Ferrell and Adam McKay stuff. Like it's a thing we just don't have anymore as much of. Like we used to have these kind of like almost industries where like we could have these SNL vehicles be produced at different places and would have different sensibilities and stuff. And Andy Samberg rules, Lonely Island rules. Yeah, just wanted a bit more of him, unfortunately.
But at the same time, he makes the most out of what he's in here, particularly like his introduction being like they're both drawing stuff. Him and Kyle Mooney. He's like, "What you working on?" I was like, "Oh, just this thing on this Brigsby Bear," and he's like, "Yeah, I dig that." That's like him and the glasses once again, like you're talking about. He's like such a fun like kind of like side person. Even though I love that he ends up being a part of the movie later. He's got like the disco ball helmet, and he's like thumbs up.
Yes.
For like Brigsby Bear and everything. It's just like he adds a little bit of a spice, and I think he's underrated as like a genuine actor as well amongst these people, because like he kind of feels like most people pigeonhole him as like, oh, he's Andy Samberg. He kind of screams and yells a lot, whatever, hot rod shit like that. But I just think like his vehicles also have been like some of my favorites of like the recent people, like Popstar or Hot Rod.
Masterpiece.
I saw Hot Rod at an early screening, and I can't tell you how much that like blew everyone's fucking minds. Like I would tell people about like, you don't get it. Hot Rod fucking rules. I can't emphasize enough how like one of my favorite motivations for any character in a comedy in the last like 25 years is him really wanting to get Ian McShane the heart surgery so he can kick his ass. I think is one of the funniest motivations any character's ever had for a movie.
Yeah, and like he doesn't have as many vehicles, weirdly enough, but I mean, like, Popstar is one of those movies I return to, like, all the time. I think that movie is, like, an absolute masterpiece, and he is, like, so fucking funny in that movie. Like, I mean, just him reading the Rolling Stone review is, like, one of the funniest things where he's like, we'll call it mixed reviews. It's just, God, I love that movie. And even, like, Palm Springs, you know, like, it's a really great way that like that movie's really funny and really ridiculous, but like you're saying, like him as an actor is like very good. He's a really great actor, and he's married to Joanna Newsom, which is fucking awesome. She rules too. But
still like blows my mind every time I remember that. Just such an interesting
weird
couple.
It's so bizarre.
Especially seeing them like at the SNL concert recently. They're just like amongst the crowd of like different celebrities, just the two of them laughing with each other. Like, okay. That makes sense. He was also really good recently in the one movie, Self-Reliance, the Jake Johnson movie.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
He's pretty fun in that as well. But yeah, and Palm Springs, I do think that kind of feels like what you were talking about. the last example, really, because of like the pandemic and shit, of like one of these SNL people getting to make like kind of a vehicle for themselves like that. And such a crime that movie got fucking like dumped to Hulu, because that movie rules. It deserves to be seen by more people.
There's one more sequence I think we haven't really talked about too much, which is when Kyle Mooney goes to see a movie. Which,
yes,
all those posters are great. I think, do they end up going to see Detective for Hire? Is that what they? I don't remember.
No, they don't. It's amazing, but I believe it's Hockey. I forgot. Hockey High is the name of it. Yeah, because it's good. With Tim Heidecker playing the hockey coach, which is such a pitch perfect like Mighty Ducks parody. In there, it's just like, oh man, the my car's not working. I gotta get you kids over to practice. Like perfect use of Heidecker too. Heidecker's a guy who, I don't know if you've heard the Adult Swim show Marco Polo on our Patreon, patreon.com/cinema #2 letter. I have a very love-hate relationship with like the Tim and Eric stuff and like kind of his solo projects. But when he gets implemented like by somebody else into another thing, he's like so perfect. Like such a great spice to add into this, whether it's like Us, or what else was he in recently? He has a weird career.
Well, he's in
like
Y2K.
Right, Y2K. He's very fun in. Yes, or just other weird things, like he's the abusive dad to the Thing in Fan 4 Stick.
Oh, is he? Believe it or not, I don't remember anything about that movie, unfortunately.
What? No.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, but like the comedy, the Rick Alverson movie is like, I mean, it is a very bleak movie, but he is really fantastic in that. And like, yeah, just like also another guy where like incredibly funny and goofy when he wants to be, if you see any of his like, you know, any of the stuff he does on like the internet, but also like a great actor if you actually get him. Like he is really good in Us, like genuinely as an actor and also as a comedic force.
Another great use of him recently was in The People's Joker. He plays Perry White as like an Alex Jones type. He's just basically doing his Alex Jones impression. That's Perry White, but it's pretty great.
I mean, like, yeah, when he's doing his kind of like something like, have you seen Mr. America? That like that like mockumentary he made.
Right, that's related to On Cinema, I believe.
Yeah,
right?
it's like him as that character like running for office. It is like, it's so hilarious. He is amazing. Also his music is really good. Like he makes like music like a few years ago there was like rumors that he was divorced, and then he made an album called like What the Brokenhearted Do, that's all these like sort of like big pop rock kind of like breakup songs. It's so good. He's very, very, very talented guy.
For sure. While we're talking about, I guess, the movie theater thing, the one other sequence we haven't really talked about is the ending of this movie, the premiere of the Brigsby Bear movie, or as it is titled, its full title, The Brigsby Bear Movie I Made with My Friends.
Yeah,
which
is really good.
Which is a great resolve of like the kind of like recurring like thing where he'll just type out, like we mentioned the how to learn things from my computer, but there's another one where it's like how to make special effects for a movie, I need help please. Just like going too long with the searches. But yeah, that premiere sequence is like, it's like you mentioned, I'm also a sucker for like the let's make a movie, bunch of scrappy nobodies like try and put on a show kind of movie. And that whole sequence where you see everybody watching the movie and kind of having like their like a little bit of remembering, like, oh, here's where we did this, here's where we did that. Like Greg Kinnear and Beck Bennett watching it together, all this other stuff.
Oh my god,
so sweet.
Kinnear like mouthing his lines, and then Beck Bennett like looks at him and like laugh. It's like such a funny little moment. I love that.
Yeah, but like everybody like, you know, having like really, especially also Matt Walsh and Michaela Watkins watching the explosion, and Michaela like digs deep into like his armpit, like, no, I can't look at it, and all that is like very sweet. But the fact that Kyle Mooney can't watch it with everybody, he's like too nervous about it, and he's like throwing up in the bathroom, and Spencer's like, what are you doing, man? It's fine, don't worry about it. But he's like so nervous, and then he goes inside that movie theater, and it's I've seen this scene so many times, but it never fails to like really work for me. Everyone fucking claps for his goddamn movie, and they all like go around and hug him. And, you know, everybody's, like, endeared to him. And you see the little Brigsby Bear in the corner, and he waves to it. It's just kind of like, he's done with that. We don't need any more. And the movie just ends there. Exact point to end this movie. You kind of mentioned this, like, in a worse movie, we'd have an epilogue where it's like, oh, he's getting used to society now, when he's going to film school or some shit. Love that we don't get any of that shit.
No,
just
the
movie emotionally ends there, and we don't need any more.
Yeah, again, like, it knows when to get out. It knows when it is at the like emotional peak of the movie, which is like, yeah, the screening, and it's like, and it just gets out quickly. And I just like, again, when every comedy is like over 2 hours long now, like it's such a delight to have this movie, which is like under 100 minutes. And yeah, the whole sequence is really sweet. I love like everyone kind of coming together and like hugging that in that moment. I think that's really great. I did have a funny moment thinking of when they're watching the movie, they cut to Alexa Demi, and it's like the same shot as like that meme from Euphoria where she's like, "Is this fucking play about us?" And I just thought that was so funny. And also I was like, you know what? Put Kyle Mooney as this character in Euphoria season 3. Like, fuck it. Like, you know, that show's already a disaster. So, you know, why not pump some life into it? But
I don't want Sam Levinson touching this sweet boy. I don't want him anywhere near James.
Sam Levinson is attached to direct a Brigsby Bear full feature film? What?
Oh, no. I do remember I made the joke on Letterboxd when I first watched this of like, I can't wait for the gritty in-universe reboot of Brigsby Bear starring like Ray Winstone.
It's me, Brigsby Bear.
Oi, I'm about to Brigsby up your butt.
Oh god, yeah. Any other cameos we haven't talked about? I feel like we're missing someone, but I think I
mean, in terms of like the bigger people, I think we cover most. I'll just shout out that the guy who's at the grocery store is a guy named Nick Rutherford, who was also a writer on SNL. And was also kind of part of like the initial sketch team for like Kyle Mooney and Beck Bennett, which I think that's also another thing that's kind of interesting is that like that energy of like, oh, I'm making a movie with my friends also translates even to this movie in itself, the kind of independent spirit. It's like kind of like it's almost foolproof for me for like making a movie about, you know, making movies and stuff like that, where it's like, oh, you actually have all your friends together. And I think sometimes that can feel a bit like irksome. Like I think I've talked about my relationship with Kevin Smith a lot, but I think he relies on that a bit too much, and it feels much more kind of like fan servicey. He just did his movie, the 4:30 movie, which is about like a group of people going to like a movie theater and trying to hang out there. The whole him these like 3 kids, and it's very autobiographical about Kevin Smith's whole like backstory and whatnot. And that movie is like full of fucking like, you know, some obvious like kind of like, oh, telling the future jokes like, oh, they're making a Batman movie that's coming out next summer. Oh, a Batman movie. No one will ever want to see one of those.
I do feel like a lot of the where I was scared of what this movie was comes from a lot of that like you know, admittedly like what little I have seen of Kevin Smith and that kind of like, we talked about Clerks. I loved Clerks when we watched it, but like I feel like a lot of this kind of movie, the kind of like indie DIY making a movie with your friends, is just really indebted to Clerks. And like admittedly Clerks does it really, really well, but too many movies have kind of tried to riff on that, and it just kind of doesn't feel the same. And this is kind of a movie that does do it in a really kind of fun and unique and a genuine kind of way.
And even Clerks 3 kind of tries to do this very same plot.
Yeah, it does.
And not quite as well, necessarily.
No. Clerks 3 also does some other things that are questionable, but, you know.
Yeah, well, didn't you watch this movie and just like, man, what if Kyle Mooney died of a heart attack? Like at the end of this suddenly. Wouldn't that be great?
You know, sometimes I do genuinely think of Clerks, that part of Clerks 3 and just kind of like, what happened there? What the fuck was that? That's so weird. Ugh. Such a bizarre movie.
Right. As opposed to Brigsby Bear, which is kind of a bizarre movie, but has a bit more of an earnest heart and a grounded emotional center that we've been kind of talking about. That makes it just kind of work a lot better than you'd expect, especially as like a great SNL vehicle for Mooney, but also balanced by like David McCary's direction and an incredible cast, kind of like getting the exact vibe right of this sort of awkward situation, but having a bit of like a sincere heart about the laughs that are there, but also having, you know, like I mentioned, like not letting the laughs become too much of the wackiness and focus. And I've mentioned this earlier, but like I liked Y2K all right, but you can really tell that like that kind of like goofier stick that Mooney's going for in that movie, kind of unchecked, doesn't quite work nearly as well as like what McCary adds to this movie to make it much more like earnest and heartfelt and just very sweet in a way. But I'll consider those my final thoughts. If you have your final thoughts on Brigsby Bear, Brian.
The thing with Y2K is that, like, a lot of it ends up feeling like just an extended SNL sketch. I think I used that term on our last episode, but, like, a lot of Y2K does feel like that a little bit. This doesn't feel like that. You know, again, it has that emotional sincerity you're talking about. But I think the ways in which that, like, I mean, you talked about, like, the way that, like, Kyle Mooney and his friends are making a movie, and so are James and his friends within the movie. But I also just think of, like, the bits where they are, like, showing them making the movie or showing, like, the final product. It weirdly captures the energy of what I imagine, like, SNL must feel like, the kind of camaraderie and coming together a lot better than, like, the Jason Reitman movie did, for instance. But also, like, it captures that essence of, like, what it must be like to be on SNL, while also balancing a kind of more emotional sincerity, which, like, Y2K doesn't. Well, it kind of tries to do, but in a very hand-wavy kind of way. But this movie is, like, look, yeah, a very strange plot, and yet it really works, you know? It's funny. I think Mooney is a really great performer here. The supporting cast is great, and, like, just so many great, like, cameos, like we talked about. And, you know, this movie is, like, it's on thin ice a lot of the time, and it really kind of, like, nails it a lot, you know, for what it's trying to go for, because it knows what it's trying to go for. It knows that it's trying to be this kind of, like, movie about making movies, movie about DIY kind of filmmaking, a movie about, you know, friendship, you know, and kind of having this kind of relationship with other people that you can kind of come together and create something really fun. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I think as we get, you know, to the kind of between the lines section in a little bit here, I was often thinking about kind of, like, what is the right sort of indie project for an SNL, like, star? And there's a few different examples of that, which we both kind of have, but I think this is a really great example of that, of, like, both the DIY side of things, but also the, like, you can just make something really, really small and personal. And I think that, like, have a lot of that personality come through, which I think is really, like, it's a way to do this kind of, like, SNL Vehicle as, like, an indie project, which I think is, like, it's really great. And I wish we got more of these, but you know, this is a really delightful movie.
Yes, delightful movie here, Brigsby Bear. We should mention, by the way, we didn't say this in our earlier episodes. We unintentionally for this season had all of our movies start with the letter B.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
We came across this weirdly, but yeah, Blues Brothers, Brigsby Bear, Barb and Star, Bewitched, Billy Madison, and Best in Show. That kind of came to us after we had, like, gotten Bewitched, and we were secure on Blues Brothers, but then we had Brigsby Bear and Barb and Star. We were like, oh wait, all these start with a B. So we intentionally made sure that Billy Madison and Best in Show were the last two. Just it's a real B grade season.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about, you know, speaking of B's, Brian, we gotta move on into our next segment, Between the Lines.
Between the Lines.
So, Between the Lines is a segment that we do every episode where Brian and myself recommend another film that, you know, either relates to the kind of lighter criteria of the episode with, like, I for Indie, for SNL, or just has, like, a similar connection in some way to the, you know, this particular movie with Brigsby Bear. So, Brian, you're going first this time. What is your recommendation for Between the Lines?
Yeah. So as I was just talking about this kind of idea of what is an indie SNL vehicle, how do you, you know, what does that mean? How do you do that? I have two SNL cast members, weirdly enough, in this movie. The Meyerowitz stories, New and Selected, from Noah Baumbach, from 2017, released on Netflix. In case anyone doesn't know, this movie is about this, basically 3 generations of this family. Dustin Hoffman is the eldest. kind of grandfather figure here, who plays this like artist who didn't get a lot of recognition back in his day, but is maybe kind of hoping towards this kind of renaissance, I guess. And then his three middle children, Adam Sandler, Ben Stiller, and Elizabeth Marvel, as they are kind of coming together once again. Their father gets sick at some point, and they have to figure out this kind of weird dynamic, as well as uncovering like the sort of unrealized potential that each of them kind of faces at this point in their lives. You also have Adam Sandler and Ben Stiller's children show up in the movie. More Adam Sandler's like college-age daughter, who's going to film school, which is results in some really, really funny bits in this movie. Sandler is someone who has quite a few of these kind of like dramatic turns, and I think he is just incredible in this movie. I love this movie so much. I've seen it multiple times, and I mentioned this earlier, but like the thing about Sandler is he's so goofy, you know, and he there's a great bit in this movie where he sings a song with his daughter on like the piano. They play it together. That is incredibly sweet and funny and amazing. And then there's there's such an underlying sadness to him, you know, like there's kind of like that sad clown kind of thing to Sandler in some ways, and it's used so well in this movie. I love him. Ben Stiller's really great. You know, he's someone I have a kind of rocky relationship with. I think he only did one season of SNL. Is that correct?
Yeah, he was actually only on the show for 3 months because
okay.
he just wanted to do like a lot more of the inserts, kind of like video stuff. But then when he tried to do like stuff live, he was like, "Oh, I can't really do this," and so he had a very short tenure in SNL.
Right, but he's really fantastic in this movie as kind of the more like arrogant sibling. He's gone into like financial, like insurance kind of stuff or something like that. And Elizabeth Marvel is incredible. She has like one scene that is just such a knockout in this movie. I think when we talked about A Real Pain, we talked about how it was kind of a sincere, like, this is a dramedy, right? And not like what people say is a dramedy where it's like more a comedy, more a drama, but with the other element. Like, this is a full on, like, it is both incredibly sad about, like, you know, some of the things that come out about this family and the ways that each of them kind of grew up and what has happened, but has just some amazing bits with Sandler. I mean, him trying to park towards the beginning of the movie is amazing. Yeah, I mean, like, I love Noah Baumbach so very much. I'm always excited to see what he does, and this is just, like, perfectly in his wheelhouse. It's kind of post his collaborations with Greta Gerwig, so there's a bit of that kind of humor, but it's much drier and much sadder than, like, Frances Ha, for instance, or something like that, which I also love. But yeah, it's a fantastic movie. It's got great, you know, also great kind of cameos from people like Adam Driver. Judd Hirsch shows up. Sigourney Weaver shows up. Great bit where Dustin Hoffman is like, she said, "Hello, my name is Sigourney." I said, "Hello, my name is Dustin Hoffman," or whatever. Yeah, I love this movie. I feel like among the Baumbach movies, it is not maybe the most discussed. I feel like Frances Ha and like Marriage Story are up there, but it's fantastic. It's great that he gets to work on stuff, but it's a bit sad that Netflix has kind of been the only source of him to get projects made and stuff like that. Also, a score by Randy Newman, you know, who's been scoring Baumbach's movies as of late, which is fantastic. You love to see it. Yeah, The Meyerowitz Stories. I assume you have seen this movie, but yeah, how do you feel about it and the cast and Baumbach in general?
I think this is my favorite of the Baumbachs I've seen. Mainly, I've seen Frances Ha, White Noise, Marriage Story, Squid and the Whale, and Mistress America. But I think this one is like the exact right tone I like for Baumbach, which, like, I'm sorry to bring up this person's name, but it's good to have somebody making a good version of like Woody Allen-esque movies.
No, sure, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It feels kind of like that dramedy vibe that you're referring to, about like sort of in this case the kind of like social elite kind of class for New York. But I do agree with you that like the dynamics still feel very real, especially for like they establish it like, oh, Ben Stiller and Adam Sandler, Elizabeth Marvel are all half siblings basically, right, from various different marriages that he's had, which I love. Also his various ex-wives that show up, like Candice Bergen, or fucking Emma Thompson.
Emma Thompson is his
Always
current wife. Yeah,
love Emma Thompson.
she is
always.
drunk the entire time. It's a really
Yes.
great supporting performance from her. Yeah.
Wonderful supporting performance, yeah. But I think this one of the thing is my favorite of kind of like doing that kind of like smart erudite kind of like dramedy about like these characters being together in a way that I think I prefer it to. I mean, I love Frances Ha. I think that movie's great. And I'm a defender of white noise, and that movie is like,
Good
I get it
movie.
being so alienating to people.
Yeah,
It is such a
no.
weird, wild fucking movie. But I mean, I like all of the Bombacs. Even like, I'm someone who I liked Marriage Story. I didn't love Marriage Story necessarily. I wouldn't put that like on the upper echelon of his stuff. But Squid and the Whale was like a very crucial movie for me as a kid.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, this is like my first adult movie about like adult family situations and all that. Jeff Daniels is amazing in that movie. And he also just has a weird screenwriting career too with like the Wes Anderson movies. But
Right.
even he's a co-screenwriter on Madagascar 3, Europe's
man.
Most Wanted.
He
The
had to-
good Madagascar movie.
the only one I haven't seen actually, weirdly enough. But hey, he had to pay that. He had to get that divorce from Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Still so fucking weird that
Very
they were a
bizarre.
couple. I can't see
Um,
that. It just feels so weird to me.
Also, you mentioned Mistress America. That is like maybe my favorite Bomback. I think that movie is a masterpiece. I love that movie so much.
Probably my least favorite Bomback. But that's a discussion for a different time.
Someone hasn't seen Greenberg, the other Ben Stiller.
That's true. I
Bomback
haven't.
movie,
I'm
not
sure that
good.
would be worse. Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, from a lot of people, that's not his best. But I also really like how I agree with you. This is a great example for like Sandler, for like kind of like being the exact middle ground between like his comedy and drama stuff. But even Stiller, I agree with you, has like such a weird, complicated history where like he had like the sort of like big comedy boom at like the turn of the new millennium, right? Stuff like There's Something About Mary, and then the Meet the Parents movies and all that other stuff. And I think particularly like with that and like Zoolander, which did revisit, and I fucking love Zoolander so much. But I do kind of like look at, you know, his career where like he had the two different ways. He could go the Zoolander route, or he could go the Meet the Parents route. And I think his comedy career was way more of like the Meet the Parents route to his detriment. The kind of like exasperated guy who does this all the time. I'm so like upset. Like he really laid that out. Even in like the kids' movies, like Night of the Museum, he's doing that pretty much.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And it's like kind of frustrating because when he's able to kind of do like something in Meyerowitz stories where there is that kind of frustration,
Yeah,
but
he
it
played on
doesn't feel
really
like that's the only note for the character. Yeah, it feels just more like a believable anger about like dealing with admittedly these eccentric characters around him. It's a much more nuanced version of that. And I kind of miss him being in stuff now that he's like a director.
Yeah,
anyway.
he just
like,
yeah.
I love Severance, obviously. I haven't seen the second season yet, any of that, but I loved his work on Severance, and I think he's genuinely a very good director, even like the films that he's directed, because he also did like The Cable Guy, which is an insane Jim Carrey movie, wild fucking movie that I can't believe exists, but also Reality Bites and Tropic Thunder. He's a genuinely really good like director, so I like that he's able to do that, but at the same time, I do kind of miss a certain bit of like the Stiller-ness, especially also if you haven't seen any of it, the Ben Stiller Show, which is from the 90s, a sketch comedy show, which has a lot of like big comedic talents like were involved, like Dan Harmon, and Jack Black also appeared on it, a bunch of other stuff like that. He's such an interesting person for, we kind of mentioned this earlier, people shepherding other like kind of comedic talents. Like Stiller was a big proponent of that. And I think that's why he still even has it to this day where like, I love that he gave Zach Cherry such a crucial role in fucking Severance, and he's so goddamn great on that show. Like, you can tell like he spots comedic talent and really wants to utilize them. Even like the reason Jack Black has a career is because of fucking Ben Stiller. Really, because he like gave him a lot more of the opportunities early on.
Yeah, and I think he is a good example of kind of like Sandler, of like these kind of guys where we've had his kind of classic comedies, right? He's in, you know, Zoolander, Tropic Thunder, all that stuff, and like I like when people use him in a dramatic sense, like Bomback, who's worked with like 3 times now, right? Greenberg, Meyerowitz stories, and then While We're Young, which is one I haven't revisited in a while, but I liked at the time. And so, yeah, I just like, I would love to see them collaborate again, or just see like Stiller maybe do something like anything. But I like when he is kind of used, his shtick is kind of used in an interesting way. And I think this will be kind of, this theme will be recurring throughout the season of like SNL people doing kind of using their shtick, establishing it, and then kind of like using it in interesting ways with different filmmakers and stuff. And it's something I'm fascinated by. So yeah, that's my recommendation.
Well, my recommendation for this week is Sleeping with Other People, directed and written by Leslie Headland, which is a romantic comedy that mainly focuses around Jason Sudeikis, the SNL cast member in question, playing Jake, and Lainey, as played by Alison Brie, who we established early on in the movie that they meet in college in a little meet cute thing where she was trying to sleep with the RA at his dorm and is making a scene, and he ends up covering for her when she's about to get kicked out, and brings her into his dorm and kind of have like an interesting rapport and are very friendly with each other. And eventually it results in the two of them going up on the roof and admitting to each other like, oh yeah, you haven't had sex with anybody. Well, I haven't either. So we're both virgins. And they have sex right up there on top of the roof. And then they separate from each other. And they don't see each other again until about 10 years later. They're both living in New York. And Jake has become a sort of womanizer who sleeps around with many people. And by contrast, Lainey has become very fixated on her one relationship with this doctor character played by Adam Scott, who she, has been in a relationship with for a while, but he actually has a fiance, and she knows that she's kind of like secondary, but she still is like in love with this guy, and she wants to try and get like off of that love addiction. So she ends up literally going to like a support group for people who are like too addicted to love, which Billy Eichner is speaking at, which is very funny.
Very good.
But yes, she ends up leaving the group at one point, and she meets Jake on the street. He's just walking by, and they both kind of realize like, oh wait, we're both in kind of like a weird rut with our own like love lives. So how about we kind of just like help each other out with sleeping with other people? And it becomes this, very When Harry Met Sally-esque rom-com with between the two of them. And I think it's an incredibly funny, wonderful movie, especially in like, the 10 years since this movie came out, is a great example of like what we've lost with the rom-com, I think. Because there's like so much like the back and forth that's like very flirtatious, very vulgar, but it doesn't feel like in the way where it feels, oh, this is too much of a like Apatow-esque comedy. It feels very well written by Headland, and I think it explores a lot of stuff about relationship that is obviously like heightened the rom-com sense, but it has like kernels of truth throughout. And plus, such an amazing cast around. Like I mentioned those three, but the best friend is played by Jason Mantzoukas, one of the funniest people I think fucking alive right now. One of her best friends is Natasha Lyonne. Adam Brody plays one of Alice. Just Brian, like I gotta keep mentioning people. It's gonna be like the fucking Avengers Endgame footage. Just Brian's gonna keep fucking cheering. Amanda Peet, Brian.
Also great. Those were my main three like heavy hitters for this movie. Like
right.
Mantzoukas is every scene he's in is just like the funniest thing I've ever seen. He is just so fucking hilarious. God,
so good. Yeah, but the big thing is really like Sudeikis and Alison Brie have a wonderful chemistry with each other. It feels very earned, and there's the whole thing of like two friends who act like a couple but they're not a couple. That kind of dynamic that. There was a point where that would feel cliche. Even I probably would have said around the time this movie came out, like, oh, that classic rom-com cliche. And absence makes the heart grow fonder. So now I'm like, please, more of that. I need it in my veins. And it's so interesting, especially with, like, Alison Brie, I've loved ever since Community. I think she's such an incredible, wonderful actress. And she's obviously done a lot of, like, interesting stuff after Community with, like, The Glow Show, and then some of the weird projects she's done with her husband, Dave Franco, that she's done since then. But I always felt like she kind of got short-shrifted, especially like watching this movie. Like she should have been like the next fucking Julia Roberts or something like that. Just been in like every fucking like big rom-com that would come out there. And Sudeikis is also no slouch. She's like very fun against her. I think he kind of also got pigeonholed into, because on SNL he played a lot of kind of like the brash, kind of like chauvinistic guys, and that's a bit here with the Jake character, but I like that there's a bit more of like a sincerity and a heart that really comes through with this guy. You can tell it's like, oh, the reason he's like such a womanizer is like how much he just like is fractured by the idea of having relationships, and they go into that a bit more with like his past and stuff. But yeah, I think the two of them are so charming together, so endearing. It's a great heart for this movie, and it is just interesting. We've been talking about kind of like, oh, the weird streaming war stuff. It's weird how you have like the star of Ted Lasso, the star of Glow, and even Leslie Headland, who has not made another movie since this, because after this she's done mainly like streaming stuff like A Russian Doll, which I haven't seen.
Masterpiece.
I know it's a very popular show. I haven't seen much of it, but also the recent Star Wars show, The Acolyte, which
Yeah.
was very hotly talked about. I'll just say when it came out,
Yeah.
and the whole time I was watching that show, I just kept thinking, man, I wish you got to make a Star Wars movie instead of having to stretch out a Star Wars movie into a show.
Make this a Star Wars movie.
So look,
Have them
sleeping
fall
with
in love in
other
space.
sleeping with other Jedis.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of fun there. Just like two people on the council, just like, have you been sleeping over with Yaddle yet? Yaddle's like really raring to go for you.
Wait,
Like,
hold
I don't
on.
know.
This is an untapped market. The Star Wars rom-com. I think this is the next direction they should take this in. Like,
I'm saying, man. I mean, I'd be down for
Like-
that. Love Amongst the Stars. But yeah. So based on what you kind of intimated, and I saw also on your letterbox, you watched it earlier today, Brian, sleeping with other people.
I did. Yes, I watched this. I agree with you. Like, I watched this, and it's like this movie's from 2015. Like, this is not that it's a decade ago, but it doesn't feel that long ago. And immediately you feel like, oh my god, we've been deprived of some good food for so long. Like, there's a lot of elements of this movie that feel very grounded in 2015.
True.
A
There's
little-
certain references, like they reference like Game of Thrones and shit. And it's like, oh yeah, this is
yeah, and
before
I'm
me.
like,
we stopped
Jesus.
that.
Which it does kind of date the movie a little bit, but like, again, like, it's one of those movies you mentioned the supporting cast, and it's like, even just a movie like this, which is a very small indie movie, has an incredible supporting cast, and all of these kind of rom-coms, these kind of like indie dramedy, rom-com, whatever you want to call it, like, they all used to have such amazing cast members where, like, Catherine Waterston shows up later and is
Yes.
great in this movie, like, and they all have amazing bits. Like, Adam Brody's scene in this movie is unbelievable. He is just so hilarious. I mean, his delivery where he's just like, I don't even know 16 guys.
Yeah.
is amazing. And like, Alison Brie, yeah, she is so incredible. I've been rewatching a little bit of Community recently, and like, she is so fucking funny and so amazing on that show. And I agree with you, like, feels like she should have been like a huge star, like should have been like a Jennifer Lawrence type of like massive, star at this point. What I also just love about this movie is it's horny as shit.
Very.
Like, another thing we're missing is like sex scenes in movies, and just kind of like, not even just like sex scenes, because the sex scenes in this movie are like, there's not a lot of like nudity. There's a lot of like
No.
people moaning and kind of like, doing that kind of stuff, but it's just like any kind of like just that like sexual chemistry that we're missing so much from movies when you have like some hot actors. Like, it's absolutely just something we are missing. And just this like perfect balance that this movie has of like, it is grounded with the emotions and what these characters are like, and it's that kind of like really comfy type of rom-com, where you just want to like have a warm blanket, and it just feels so comfy to like watch. And yet, like you said, it's kind of heightened a little bit. It's taken to like a little bit of like a like that rom-com kind of thing, but yeah, it just really deals with that kind of thing. And like, it's maybe a little too When Harry Met Sally. It's leaning a bit into that whole like, can men and women ever be just friends? Which is, obviously Harry Met Sally is a masterpiece, but like, if Brigsby Bear is sort of the Sundance-y kind of like DIY version, this is the other side of that, which it is kind of Sundance-y, but it's just really comfy and really like comforting and like fun to watch, and just kind of like, it all is also well made. Like, Leslie Headland is a good director, and like a good writer, and like knows what to do with these characters. It's like, it looks like a real movie. Another thing, we've just like, these movies have just lost a lot of that production value and look like garbage on streaming. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed this, and it's just like, I also definitely confused it with the movie Other People, the one with Jesse Plemons and Molly Shannon. Like, I
Very different movie. Very
sure. But they all came out around the same time, so I do think of like these, like, I confuse them a lot of the time, but yeah,
Yeah.
very fun movie.
I mean, I'll just say this: the kind of like the epicenter of all these things you're talking about, this movie does so well is I'll just say the bit with the Snapple bottle.
I mean, that, yeah,
And
it's
right,
just like
which- it's incredibly like funny and raunchy, but also there is like a sexual energy to it that's very fun. And I think it also helps like move along the story at the same time too. It doesn't have that like Apatow problem of like we're just riffing.
yeah.
It's like no, it actually like it builds into like I think the recurring element, even how that ends up being brought up. It's like that was our thing. That was our thing we brought up with each other, and you used on some other guy or whatever.
I will say, with this performance with Sudeikis, there's like a sprinkling of Ted Lasso in here, a little bit, which like again, I liked that first season as well, but seeing it in here, I was kind of like, oh no, this is kind of like an ominous vision of things to come a little bit with like the later 2 seasons of Ted Lasso. But yeah,
it feels like there's the shades of at least like what they were trying to do with season 2 of Ted Lasso and kind of trying to explore his darker side and what they fucking failed at
yeah.
so hard with that show.
Here's a question for you based on this movie. Actually, I was wondering
Mhm.
last night. Obviously, we're 10 years on. Who would you cast in this movie if it was today? Obviously, you could
Oh,
still make it
shit.
with Sudeikis and Alison Brie. I don't have anyone for the Alison Brie character, but I have one for the Sudeikis character.
Go ahead, please.
Glenn Powell. I think like
That's true.
a lot of that kind of like the womanizer, the kind of like this guy's so fucking charming that like my pants are already off, kind of energy. I think is like perfect for this movie, and so like yeah. But I was thinking of him. I don't know if you've had anyone off the top of your head at all, but I was just thinking about this with all we're talking about.
Yeah, admittingly, it is kind of a bummer that like the person who we're like swapping in isn't like another like a funny like but handsome SNL cast member. It's Glenn Powell, one of the most attractive, hottest people who's like alive right now, and that's no
That's
shade on
true.
Glenn Powell, obviously, with all that complimentary stuff I said about how hot he is. But it is there is that kind of sadness that it's like, oh, we can't just have like another like I don't know SNL cast member like right now. I couldn't see like I don't know fucking Mikey Day doing this. There's no real like equivalent.
Yeah, the only
really
other one
now.
I could think of was like Pete Davidson, just because like he has that kind of like, oh, he's hot. He is like, he's got the riz, as the kids say, like he, that kind of thing. But like, yeah, there aren't really any other SNL members, I don't think, that can kind of do this kind of thing, which yeah shows a lot of like where we're kind of at right now. But whatever.
I don't know. Maybe Bowen Yang. Put Bowen Yang in
Oh,
there.
I'm sure, absolutely, I can see him.
Do it.
yeah.
Really play against type
I mean,
for Bowen Yang.
He's kind of one of those guys who's like, he's getting a lot of supporting performances, but he's kind of like, fine, I'll do it myself, and he's making the Wedding Banquet remake. So like,
Yes.
kind of cool.
Yeah. Excited for him, and he's one of the better things about Wicked as well.
Yeah.
But I guess by like the contrast for like the Alison Brie character, speaking to SNL, I wouldn't mind somebody like Chloe Fineman, who I think is underrated on that show and I think is very fun. Who had like some of you might have seen her in Megalopolis recently, amongst other things.
Yeah.
I think she'd be pretty solid in kind of that part.
Sure.
That's just the problem of like, yeah, there's not as much, I think, there's some other people that are currently on SNL that I think would be even interesting in there, like Sarah Sherman, even though
That was
she's
the other
very
one, yeah.
weird as a performer,
Yeah.
and would like, I think more likely even be better as like the kind of like Natasha Lyonne side character,
Yeah.
which I love. Leone's so fucking fun in that
So
movie too.
good.
Just like, oh, you need to go out and like fuck somebody.
You need to fuck
Like,
this
cool.
guy. Come on. Love her. God.
So great, yeah. And without this connection, that's what led to Russian Doll.
That's
Two
the
of them working
yeah.
together. Yeah.
And, I mean, like, yeah. Sub recommendation. Watch Russian Doll. That show is an absolute masterpiece. Just like her on some like real like, obviously like, Poker Face is more Columbo, but like that show is kind of like her auditioning for the Columbo kind of role. So yeah.
Are they even
it's
doing
great.
a third season of that show at this point?
I don't know, because I know the Poker Face is getting a second season, so I think she's a bit busy right now. But I would hope so. I think those first 2 seasons are like, I know the second season was kind of divisive, but I really love it. I think it's great. But yeah.
And sadly now that Headland's schedule is a bit more open.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I'm sorry to bring this up again, but like, I was watching this last night and just thinking like, it does kind of, it's great that she got to make a Star Wars thing, like great for her and great for her bank account, but it's a little sad that she's kind of gotten swept up into the IP kind of kind of stuff, unfortunately. But you know.
Well, I will say it does appear that she's got a new thing coming up, Dying for Sex, which is a miniseries starring Michelle Williams.
Oh fuck, I'm all in. All my chips are in, baby. Let's go.
And speaking to SNL, Jenny Slate is also the co-star apparently.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, this is exciting. Yeah, never mind. I take it back. Leslie Hutton, please, like keep cooking.
It's about a woman diagnosed with metastasized breast cancer, which ends her 15-year marriage in order to explore herself and her sexuality before her death.
I will be watching. Like 100%. That sounds right up my alley.
Yeah. So look forward to that on FX on Hulu coming soon. Once again, that sounds like an interesting movie, but I do fear that's like a mini-series. So,
yeah.
Stretching out a bit. But we'll see. I'm all for her doing more stuff in general. But, yeah, let's repeat our titles out there for people in case they wanted to add them to their watch list, Brian.
Yes, I had the 2017 film from Noah Baumbach, The Meyerowitz Stories, new and selected.
And I had the 2015 rom-com from Leslie Headland, Sleeping with Other People. Well, on that note, let's go ahead and wrap up this particular episode. And thanks some people. We got to thank Burial Grid for our music for the show. Purchases music at burialgrid.com. Thanks to Michelle Kyle for our artwork. Find her at MishKyle96 over on Twitter. And thanks to our supporters on Patreon, our cineast patrons, patreon.com/cinema, #2 letter, where for just $1 a month, you all get access to bonus episodes that we do, bonus content that we put out every month, and also get to vote for certain things that we do every season. Around this time on the Patreon, we would have already put out our March Madness a couple of weeks prior about action sequences, which was a lot of fun, I'm sure. We haven't recorded that yet, but we're very excited to. And you'll be upcoming, we'll be having some audio reviews, I'm sure. I'm not sure what we'll be doing in April, Brian. We haven't figured that out yet. I know we would have done Mickey 17 in March already. I'm not sure what we'll be doing in April for like a review, but our big bonus podcast will be a full franchise about the Final Destination series. We'll be talking about the 5 films that have currently been released in that franchise in anticipation of the 6th entry, Final Destination Bloodlines, coming out in May. It is a bummer. Like I like, the fact that we're getting a new Final Destination franchise, but Bloodlines is such a lame horror subtitle.
It is very generic.
Yeah. I don't know why we're calling it that. I'm sure familially we'll find out. But yeah, look forward to that stuff whether on the Patreon, just for like the $1 if you want to become a cineast. On a monthly basis, $1 per month, or you can buy an individual audio thing for $3. Lowest price we can do for $3 over there for an individual piece of audio. But that's all there on patreon.com/cinema #2 letter. And for more of us, if you're perusing on some hell site and you want to follow updates for us, we're going to be at cinema #2 letter on there usually, most of the big ones. And you can find me on Blue Sky or Letterboxd at Not the Who's Tommy, and I also do some writing occasionally at film-cred.com.
Yeah, you can also follow me on Twitter or Blue Sky if you want to for some reason at BRYANDRADE and the number 3. Or you can follow me on Letterboxd where posting my movie, watching stuff, doing lists, the usual stuff. So yeah, follow me on that if you would like.
On that note, you can follow us by subscribing to our feed on Apple Podcasts or other podcasting platforms. If you're listening on Talk Film Society, you want to listen to all the other great shows that are here on the network. And you can dig into the archives on our Podbean main feed for the last, 50 episodes of the show. We should mention this is episode 50 of the main feed, Cinema to the Letter, Brian. Yeah, we're milestone. Wonderful Brigsby Bear. Interesting choice to have that be. Just in the lineup of what we do. But yeah, all the other 49 episodes of this show, and also the all the old Double Edge Double Bill stuff over there on the Podbean feed. And nothing else, you can't, support the show through the Patreon. That's cool, money can be tight, but the free way to help us out is to rate, review, or simply share the show around to give us more visibility and help us, save the galaxy with Brigsby Bear out there. We need that help. We need all the help we can get. We should tease, Brian, our next episode, our end for new in this SNL Vehicle season, is going to be focusing on the 2021 film Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar, a movie we've both seen, a movie that we both love very much. Can't wait to talk about that one.
Yeah, what a masterpiece. It's gonna be a good one.
Yes, for sure. But until our next adventure, goodbye!